I don't know if you know this, but America did have concentration centers. They called them killing centers. Think Poland, the killing centers that was used to slaughter millions of Jews. They had that here. And it was in Natchez, Mississippi. It was called the Devil's Punch Bowl. Imagine why they called it the Devil's Punch Bowl. What color is punch? Now, what color is blood? Now, to describe the terrain of the Devil's Punch Bowl, it was a trench. Imagine, I would say, 2 mile wide, right, with really, really steep walls surrounding it. And it was in the middle of the woods, Natchez, Mississippi. But this specific area got zero shade. It was the perfect place to do what the Union soldiers wanted to do. Yes, Union soldiers built this concentration camp.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops. Fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the Pretty Realist.
What's good, family? Welcome to Pretty Realist. If this is your first time joining my channel, welcome. We know about a lot of genocides that have taken place worldwide as well as in this country, especially when it comes to the genocides of the Native Americans and the horrible tragedy that happened during the Holocaust. Picture this. The Civil War just ended. Confederacy, they lost. Slavery as we know it, done. It came to cotton. This was a very big deal out there, okay? It was declared illegal to have slaves. But the fight for freedom, that war was far from over for the people of Mississippi. Thousands of newly freed Black women, men, and children fled southern plantations, and they thought that they found a safe haven in this quaint little town. And they thought that the Union soldiers would have their back and that they would keep them safe. But instead of freedom, they led them to this so-called camp that became their final resting place. And it was an estimated 20,000 people. Now, historians say that that's the range. I'll let the video tell you the rest of the story. I bring to you all the history of the Devil's Punch Bowl. Let's check it out.
Somewhere in the foothills of Mississippi, the trees grow heavy with abundant uneaten peaches. So nourishing and big these peaches look that one would wonder why the locals do not eat it. Varieties of tales have haunted the Devil's Punch Bowl in Mississippi for decades, from pirates to plane crashes. While the land itself may not be full of treasure, it is haunted by the history of mass unalivings, terror, and a past filled with hatred for Black Americans that cannot be ignored. One particularly haunting case involves the hellish treatment of Black Americans who fled to Mississippi for refuge during the Civil War of 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 freed African Americans in rebel states, and after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment manumitted all U.S. captives wherever they were. Despite these proclamations, the reality for many newly freed African Americans was far from the freedom they had hoped for. Abraham Lincoln, an American lawyer, politician, and statesman who was later elected as the 16th President of the United States in the 1860s, issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. It was a decree stating that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states should be set free.
That on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free.
But a careful look into the Emancipation Proclamation would pop up some mind-blowing questions like, why did the whites suddenly want emancipation for the blacks? Weren't these the same people who despised the blacks so much? So what changed? And who were the people that stood behind the sudden reconsideration of the blacks' predicaments? Now let us dig in to find some answers to these puzzle-like questions. In 1861, 12th of April, the American Civil War had broken out. It was so intense that the Union was losing most of its population rapidly. Although the population of the Union was more than the Southern population, this didn't seem to give them an upper hand. The northern states, also referred to as the Union states, had constituted 22 states, while the southern states, also called the Confederacy states, were made up of just 11 states. In 1860, the entire population of the United States was 31.4 million. 3.8 million men Approximately 12% of the total population were enrolled in the military service. 620,000 had died, that is 2% of the total population, in the war. Seeing this, President Abraham Lincoln knew that he had to do something. In the same vein, with his astute vision and keen mind, he had come up with the move of acquiring more manpower. Lincoln had figured that the only productive manpower which could have been readily available to salvage the sad end closing in on them were the black slaves on their shores. Abraham Lincoln had enticed the entire African American slaves with emancipation in a bid to get them to fight for the Union. This was called the Emancipation Proclamation, a decree set to liberate all slaves immediately. Things had worked out as planned by Abraham Lincoln. The Emancipation Proclamation idea had successfully lured the entire black slaves and their troops to the side of the Union. These blacks had fought loyally in a 2-year civil war against the Confederacy and had defeated them for the Union. They had fought for their belief in a brighter future where nothing other than racial and economic equality is the order. But after all said and done, the nation they had fought and won a war for was still unprepared to deal with the question of full citizenship for its newly freed black population. The Reconstruction implemented by Congress, which lasted from 1866 to 1877, was aimed at reorganizing the Southern states after the Civil War, providing the means for readmitting them into the Union and defining how whites and blacks could live together in a non-slave society. The South, however, saw the Reconstruction idea as a humiliating, even vengeful, imposition and did not welcome it. The newly freed slaves were faced with an increasingly dire situation now. Many had neither education nor money, being denied both during their enslavement. They were often forced into sharecropping, renting land from their former owners and giving a portion of their crops as rent. This arrangement kept them in a cycle of grave poverty and dependence. These challenges had become overwhelming and unendurable. Starvation, segregation, beatings, whippings, killings continued on the rise. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 loomed large, forcing free blacks to live in constant fear of being recaptured and returned to a life of servitude. In this heat, about 110,000 freed slaves and escapees would be compelled to undertake a massive exodus from the northern part of the country. Many traveled through Natchez, Mississippi, seeking shelter and a new start. By 1860, the population of Natchez was about 6,612, including 4,272 whites, 2,132 freed slaves, and 208 free blacks. By 1870, the population had grown to 9,057.
Notice that they had a separation between freed slaves and freed blacks. This is something that we definitely need to pay attention to because a lot of people seem to have it in their minds that every black person in this country around that time were slaves, which is not true. There were definitely communities with freed black people that lived there. There were also black slave owners as well. I'm wondering why didn't the free blacks help the slaves? That would have just seemed to have been, I guess they were protecting themselves, but I don't know. I just kind of would have thought that would have been something that would have happened had the freed blacks who never were slaves at all would have helped out the blacks that were once slaves and ended up being free. But that's too much like right?
With 3,728 whites and 5,329 blacks. This drastic increase in the black population raised tensions in the city. The residents of Natchez, feeling resentful that the people who were once their property were now free, called upon the Union troops, who were still lingering after the war, to devise a merciless solution, the Devil's Punch Bowl.
Wow.
The Devil's Punch Bowl is a naturally enclosed area in Natchez City, Mississippi. It got its name from the unique appearance it carries, resembling a bowl-like hollow. This camp, located at the bottom of a cavernous pit with trees on the bluffs above, was seen by the Union troops as the perfect place to harbor their captives. According to Don Estes, historian and former director of the Natchez City Cemetery, the Union decided to build an encampment for the freed blacks at the Devil's Punch Bowl and walled it off so that there'd be no escape for any of them. The Devil's Punch Bowl consisted of 3 camps, all used by the troops to imprison these already freed black slaves and put them in conditions far worse than those on the plantations. This was another concentration camp. Men were made to do unthinkably hard labor, while women and children were left behind in the camp and usually deprived of food and water. The harsh weather conditions, arduous work, malnutrition, and poor hygiene would lead to a variety of health problems, fatigue, smallpox, and other insane diseases. Experts estimate that in just 1 year, more than 20,000 freed black people died at the Devil's Punch Bowl. The death rate was so incredibly high that these prisoners had begged the troops to let them go back to the plantations, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Paula Westbrook, historian and paranormal researcher, explained that the Army didn't let the black people remove the bodies of the deceased from their midst. They just threw down some shovels and told the prisoners to bury the bodies exactly where they died. But these prisoners had already become too tired and enfeebled with incessant suffering, thus were unable at this point to dig reasonably into the ground to properly cover their dead ones. The increasingly decomposed bodies caused more diseases, and more deaths struck the camp. Regrettably, this story, like so many others, has been drowned beneath a ravine filled with pain and suffering. The United States has proved to have a deep-rooted history of racially motivated mass killings that were frequently denied and went undocumented by authorities. As James Baldwin stated in 1963, American history is longer, larger, more varied, and more terrible than anything anyone has ever said.
We hear about all of the tragedies that took place when it comes to the concentration camps, when it comes to what happened to the Native Americans, but we don't hear a lot about what happened to the Black Americans aside from slavery. And even when it comes to this story, I was unaware of how the Declaration went down, or how that even went about when it came to freeing the slaves. Because most people think that, oh, well, Lincoln just freed the slaves because he felt bad for them, or it was out the kindness of his heart. When we come to find out that it was kind of like, if I do this for you, then you have to do this for me. Now, in the back of my mind, and this is just him probably talking, in the back of my mind, they probably ain't gonna make it to even see their freedom. Because if you're gonna be out there fighting in a war, 9 times out of 10, you're either gonna make it or you're gonna die. So if I could promise them, people who are so desperate for freedom, desperate for equality as a human being, because remember, at one point in this country, Black Americans were only looked at as, I think, 3/5 of a human. They're willing to do anything. It's the same thing with the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers were kind of put in a position to where they had to fight against people who were also in similar positions as them.
Abigail Cooper, an assistant professor of history, researched the experiences of African Americans in refugee camps during the Civil War. Over 200 refugee camps were established at that time, with more than 800,000 African Americans passing through them.
If you all are enjoying this video, please make sure you click the subscribe button, click that bell. That way you'll be able to be notified anytime I drop any new videos.
These camps became places of monumental transformation for Black people. It was a time when the Black community started to see America not as an enslaver, but as their home. The camps, however, were far from what they envisioned. The conditions were grim, disease was rampant, and people lived in constant fear of raids from white Southerners. Many white people also sought shelter in these camps, but they were treated differently from Blacks. They received more rations and better treatment over the Blacks. Despite these unrelenting hardships and struggles, these camps would serve as a safe haven where these Blacks could still endeavor to experience what it feels like to be free, what it feels like to not be the property of a fellow human, what it feels like to start up what could be called a home. Families reunited, and people from various cultures and traditions came together. Some camps had access to education. For many black people, a good pair of shoes was a crucial possession. During slavery, slave owners would lock their shoes at night to prevent escape. Having shoes was essential for the journey to the camps, as it was easy to spot an escapee without them. Refugees found creative ways to protect themselves. Some even crafted makeshift footwears from plantain leaves, which had a strong smell that helped throw off the scent of the hounds used by patrollers and former owners. The journey to freedom was long and fraught with danger. Racial terror and lynchings were common, and many black people were brutally injured or killed. These retaliatory killings were often unaccounted for, but left a lasting impact on the black community. In remembering the Devil's Punch Bowl, we confront a painful chapter of American history, but we must do so to ensure such atrocities are never repeated. The suffering of those who were imprisoned, starved to death, and forced into labor to the breakdown in this cruel encampment must never be forgotten. Their plight serves as a stark reminder of the horrors of racial oppression and the long struggle for freedom and equality. As we reflect on these events, we are reminded of the words of Martin Luther King Jr., "Injustice anywhere hurts justice everywhere. We are all connected, and what affects one person directly affects everyone."
That was a lot to take in. Looking at this video and thinking about how Black Americans are being asked to have sympathy for this immigration situation, it's crazy to me, because where was the sympathy for these people? Y'all never stopped what was going on. Like, they said that someone went to go visit the concentration camp and recorded how many people died. But did y'all ever put a stop to it? Why did it take for a year for you to go down there and check on those people? Like, it just seems like there was no common sense. This is how you know that they really did not care about freeing Black Americans, unless it was only for what they needed them for. Because why would you think that it was going to work out in their favor if they had been working underneath these people who already were racist, who already were abusive, and had them in chattel slavery, and that they were just going to release them and they were all just going to be free and get jobs and be able to live in complete harmony? It's the same thing that happened when it came to how the people in Texas didn't find out that they were free until after the Emancipation Proclamation and when slavery was considered to have been outlawed. They didn't follow up. And I guess it was probably a little bit different back then because they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have TVs. But shit, you could have sent a raven or something. Like, damn, you could have sent somebody to look after these people. At least check on them to see what was going on, because why would you think that they were just going to let them go just that easy? Like, these were people, while they sat on their flat asses and didn't do anything, these were people that did all the work for them. So you should have known already that they were not going to be as receptive as you would have liked them to be when it comes to you making them have to do the job that they once had these people doing for them. I feel like that there's just too many things that this country has to heal from in order for us to get to the next level. We can't just erase the past, because everybody's past isn't told. Now, we could live in harmony. We coexist. I coexist well with all races, with all cultures. So I don't look at every white person as if they're one of these people. But at the same time, when it comes to those who have the ability to make things right, and they choose to do otherwise, or they choose to put a Band-Aid over a bullet hole, I have a problem with that. I made a video on my TikTok the other day when it comes to this Epstein list. And even when it comes to a lot of things that's going on with our weather, with how all these communities are being washed away, with the veil pretty much being lifted. America is in a detoxing stage right now. And although we do have the capabilities, well, we don't, but the elites and the people who have the financial backing do have the capability to do things like cloud seeding or do things like manipulate the weather. We've also been hearing about how there's been crazy sightings of UFOs. Last year, we had UFOs being seen, saucers that were hovering over New Jersey, and as above, so below. So just because we may have those people, those evil people who possibly are manipulating the weather, we also have an energetic force that's taking place. And it's going to be more of these tragedies happening because the same way that these people acted when they were freed is the same way that they're acting today because they lost this election. Just because you put lipstick on a pig doesn't mean that it's less of a pig. It's the same people, guys. They're the same people that they were back then in 1863. They just got more color added to the picture. Just saying. They woke. Well, I'm going to get up out of here, guys. I will see you on the next one. Listen, don't shoot the messenger, okay? Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If it's not, leave it, all right? Y'all have a good night. Make sure you follow me on all social media outlets, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops. Fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the pretty realist.